The emergency pod hissed as it settled into the alien soil, its hull groaning from the impact. Maurice unbuckled himself and immediately checked on his companion. Anastasia, the Vexlian navigator, was clutching her harness with all four of her slender arms, her bioluminescent skin flickering between nervous purples and anxious greens. Status report, Maurice said, running through the console's diagnostics. Life support, minimal. Communications, destroyed. Food reserves, enough for 3 days if we ration carefully. Anastasia's voice trembled, her translator chip rendering her clicks and whistles into perfect English. Maurice, we're stranded on an uncharted planet. 3 days before we starve. Maurice glanced at the view screen showing the alien landscape, a wilderness of towering fungi-like trees and crystalline undergrowth beneath 2 small suns. He stood up, stretching his back. 3 days? That's plenty of time for a rescue beacon to be detected. You don't understand, Anastasia said, her skin flashing red with distress. This sector is rarely patrolled. It could be weeks. We must ration everything. 1 meal per day? Maybe less. Maurice pulled out the emergency kit and examined its contents. 2 protein bars, a water purifier, a basic medical kit, and a survival knife. He looked at Anastasia's increasingly panicked expression and smiled. Tell you what, give me 2 hours. 2 hours? For what? Dinner. Anastasia watched in disbelief as Maurice sealed his environment suit and stepped out of the pod. Through the viewport, she observed him examining the alien terrain with curious eyes rather than fearful ones. This was the thing about humans that baffled the entire Galactic Council, their inexplicable optimism in the face of certain death. Maurice crouched near a cluster of crystalline formations, observing small creatures skittering between them. They resembled a cross between crabs and beetles, their shells reflecting the binary sunlight. He noted their movement patterns, the way they congregated near moisture. Patient and still, he waited. On Vexler Prime, Anastasia's homeworld, food came from automated dispensers. Her species had evolved past hunting millennia ago. The very concept of catching one's own food was considered primitive, almost barbaric. Yet here was Maurice, doing exactly that with an unsettling expertise. 20 minutes later, he had fashioned a simple trap using pod debris and elastic cords from the emergency kit. 30 minutes after that, he had caught 3 of the creatures. Anastasia watched in horror as he efficiently dispatched them, then began the process of preparing them for consumption. But Maurice wasn't finished. He ventured further, collecting samples of various plant-like organisms, carefully testing each one using the basic chemical analyzer from the medical kit. The Galactic Survival Manual said never to consume unknown organisms. Maurice seemed to view this as a suggestion rather than a rule that he returned to the pod with his arms full. Anastasia's skin had shifted to a confused yellow. What is all this? Dinner, Maurice said cheerfully. He had caught 5 of the crab beetle creatures, gathered several varieties of the crystalline fungal growths, and collected liquid from a plant that had a water-like consistency. The fungi are edible, similar amino acid structure to portobello mushrooms. These little guys have a protein structure compatible with human and Vexlian digestion. And this, he held up a container of amber liquid, is going to be our dessert base. Using the pod's heating elements, Maurice began to cook. Anastasia watched in fascination as he roasted the creatures over controlled heat, their shells cracking open to reveal pale, steaming flesh. He sautéed the fungi with a pinch of salt from the emergency rations, creating an aroma that even her chemoreceptors found appealing. Your species still knows how to do this, she asked quietly. To hunt? To forage? Maurice chuckled. Some of us never forgot. My grandfather took me camping every summer, taught me to fish, to identify edible plants, to survive with nothing but a knife and my wits. He plated the food on clean sections of the pod's interior paneling. The galaxy might be full of replicators and food synthesizers, but humans, we remember where we came from. The meal was surprisingly delicious. The crab beetle meat was tender and slightly sweet. The fungi had a savory, earthy flavor. Anastasia ate hesitantly at first, then with genuine appreciation. It was the first time in her life she had eaten something that hadn't been processed by machines. And now, Maurice announced, dessert. He had combined the amber liquid with crushed protein bar, heating and cooling it in cycles to create a pudding-like consistency. The result was a sweet, creamy substance that dissolved pleasantly on the tongue. Anastasia's skin glowed a warm gold, the Vexlian expression of contentment and joy. Maurice, this is incredible. You created all this in 2 hours. Necessity is the mother of invention, he said with a shrug. Besides, I told you 3 days was plenty of time. At this rate, we could stay here for months if we had to. Months. Anastasia's skin flickered with disbelief. Maurice gestured toward the landscape. There's a whole ecosystem out there. Water sources, food chains, shelter materials. Humans spent 200,000 years figuring out how to survive in hostile environments before we ever built a spaceship. This place, it's actually pretty nice. Reminds me of the Pacific Northwest back on Earth. Over the next 2 days, while they waited for rescue, Maurice transformed their survival situation into something resembling a camping trip. He caught fish-like creatures from a nearby stream, identified edible tubers growing beneath the fungal trees, and even fashioned fishing line from pod wiring. He built a proper shelter, started a sustainable fire, and created tools from scavenged materials. Anastasia learned to help, her forearms proving quite useful once she overcame her initial hesitation. Maurice taught her to identify safe foods, to read the environment, to think like a survivor rather than a victim of circumstance. When the rescue ship finally arrived on the third day, its crew found something unexpected. Instead of desperate survivors rationing their last resources, they discovered Maurice cooking fresh kebabs over an open fire while Anastasia carefully tended to a collection of local fruits she was cataloging. "Sorry to interrupt your vacation," the rescue captain said dryly, a bemused expression on her face. Maurice grinned and offered her a skewer. "Want some? I was just about to make dessert." The story spread quickly through the galactic fleet. The human who turned a survival situation into a culinary adventure. The Vexlian who learned that survival wasn't about rationing fear, but about embracing adaptability as they departed the planet. Anastasia looked back at their campsite with something like nostalgia. Her skin pulsed with thoughtful blue hues. "Maurice," she said, "when we return to the station, would you teach me more about human survival techniques?" Maurice smiled. "I'd be happy to. But fair warning, my next lesson involves something called spearfishing, and it gets messy." Anastasia's skin flashed with excited yellow. For the first time in her life, she was looking forward to getting her hands dirty. In the end, the difference between humans and most other species wasn't just about technology or intelligence. It was about remembering that survival wasn't a crisis to be endured. It was a challenge to be conquered, one meal at a time.